When I came back inside and saw the trash bag still sitting on the porch, untied, slumped like a dead thing, I knew she wasn't coming back the way she left. Not after that phone call. Not after the silence that followed. She said she needed one day. One day to herself. No questions. No texts. Just space. I gave her space. And while she was gone, I watched the trash bag. I know that sounds insane, but I couldn't bring myself to move it. It felt like, if I touched it, I'd be admitting something final. Like I'd be sealing a door that maybe, just maybe, could have stayed cracked open. It sat there for 21 hours. The bag. Mocking me. Right outside the window, where I could see it every time I passed the kitchen. I didn't sleep. Didn't eat. Didn't even sit down, really. I just kept circling the house like a ghost on a loop. Front window. Back door. Hallway. Repeat. Every sound outside made me jump. Every car door slam had me checking the window like some twitchy raccoon. I kept telling myself, she said she'll be back tomorrow. But that's the thing about Marley. She always says she'll come back. She just never says who she'll be when she does. The last time she took a solo day, she came home smelling like cinnamon whiskey and someone else's shampoo. I didn't ask. I just folded her jacket, made her tea, and said I was glad she got to breathe. She kissed me on the forehead like I was a toddler. I cried in the shower that night. But this time felt colder. Calculated. There was something in her eyes when she left, like she'd already buried the version of me she used to love and was just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. So when morning came, and I mean full sun, birds chirping, normal life morning, and she still wasn't back, I stopped waiting. I picked up the trash bag, tied it tight, threw it in the bin. Then I went inside, and I packed every single thing I owned into my old Honda. Clothes, journals, a framed photo from a vacation she never remembered taking. I even took the spatula I liked. She always used the metal one that scratched the pans. I left her the house, left her the dishes, left her the hollow quiet she carved into our marriage, one lie at a time. But I didn't leave her a note. Not this time. If she wanted to know where I went, she could stare at the porch and figure it out for herself. Because when she came back, finally, sometime after lunch, in sunglasses and someone else's jacket, all she found was the trash bag gone, and me with it. She pulled into the driveway like she'd just come back from winning an award. Her engine rumbled into the silence I left behind, and when she stepped out of the car, heels clicking, hair perfect, sunglasses still on, she didn't even glance around. She had no idea I was already gone. No clue that I had watched her drive away the day before, my stomach tight with something between fear and disgust, and told myself, never again. No clue that I spent that entire night sifting through memories like junk drawers, tossing out the good ones because I no longer trusted them. And now here she was, unlocking the front door with the same hand that probably held someone else's hotel key the night before, walking in like I was supposed to be waiting, like she could just explain. But she wasn't ready for the absence, the quiet kind of absence. Not yelling, not slamming doors, not angry texts. Just gone. That kind of absence is deafening. It doesn't scream, it echoes. She stood in the entryway for a while. I know because the doorbell camera caught her reaction. I'd forgotten it was still connected to my phone. I watched the footage from a rest stop 3 hours away, chewing on sunflower seeds and hating myself for needing to see it. She stepped in, looked around, and froze. I saw her lips move. She called my name once. Twice. Her voice got sharper. She disappeared into the living room, then came back into frame, moving faster now. She opened the coat closet, ran up the stairs. She still hadn't taken off her heels. You know what I noticed? She didn't cry. Not right away. She just looked angry, like she couldn't believe I had the audacity to leave without permission. That's what it had always been with Marley. Control masked as chaos. She made messes, I cleaned them. She vanished, I waited. She told half-truths, I filled in the rest with hope. And now that I had flipped the script, just once, she looked like the victim. The footage ended with her throwing her purse across the room. The next video that auto-loaded was her pacing on the front porch, making a phone call. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. I knew the performance by heart. But what she didn't know yet, what hadn't hit her in that moment, was that I didn't just leave the house. I left the marriage. And I left behind something else too. Something she'd find soon enough, tucked away in a place only she would look. But we'll get to that. Not yet. Let her panic first. Let her wonder. From the safety of my rented room in a motel that smelled faintly of chlorine and old cigarettes, I watched the world she'd built start to unravel on the little screen of my phone. The doorbell camera kept feeding me snippets of her confusion like a private reality show. But what she didn't realize was that the empty house wasn't the whole message, it was just the opening act. The real message was tucked away, subtle, almost invisible, hidden in a place where only she would look. A place where her perfect self-control would betray her curiosity. I'd spent the last few weeks planning this exit without even knowing I was planning it. Every insult she'd thrown like a dart, every time she rolled her eyes when I spoke, every fake apology, they were little bricks building a wall I didn't know I'd eventually climb over. That day she vanished, I finally understood that my life had been a waiting room for her next lie. So when she left, I didn't just pack my bags. I staged a crime scene of absence, a vacuum so sharp it would cut her if she stepped too close. The footage of her reaction was almost surreal. She stalked through the rooms like a stranger who'd broken into her own house. She opened drawers, flipped through mail, checked my side of the closet. I saw her pull the wedding album off the shelf and drop it back like it was hot. She knelt in front of the safe we never used, punched in the code she thought I didn't know she'd changed, and opened it. Nothing. Just an envelope with her name on it. Inside that envelope was not a confession, not an accusation, but a single photograph. A picture of her at that lakefront Airbnb, the one she thought I didn't know about, standing on the balcony with her back turned, holding up a glass of wine. No caption, no explanation, just the proof of what she'd called clearing her head. Proof taken from her own social media when she thought she'd blocked me from seeing it. I'd printed it out days before, just in case. On the camera feed, I watched her sit on the floor with the photo in her hands. Her shoulders slumped. For a long moment, she didn't move at all. Then she tore the photo in half and started to sob. Not the pretty, manipulative crying she'd used to end every fight, but the kind that breaks you open from the inside. The kind I'd been doing alone in my car for years. The kind you can't fake. In that moment, something shifted in me. Watching her break didn't feel like victory. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like watching a fire finally burn itself out after you've been choking on the smoke for too long. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just sat on the edge of the motel bed, my packed bags at my feet, and whispered to myself, "You're free." But freedom, I was learning, comes with echoes. Because even as I watched her crumble, a question started gnawing at me. Had I actually escaped her? Or had I just set the stage for the next act of a story I didn't yet understand? And that's when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A text that made my heart drop. It simply read, "You think she was alone?" I stared at that message for what felt like hours, my thumb hovering over the screen, the letters swimming. You think she was alone? No emoji. No punctuation. Just that single question, like a trapdoor opening beneath my feet. My first instinct was to tell myself it was spam, some random wrong number. But deep down I knew. This wasn't random. Someone out there knew exactly where to stab, and they'd chosen their moment well. The motel room suddenly felt smaller, the humming air conditioner like a heartbeat in my skull. I closed the curtains even though they were already closed. I put my phone face down but kept flipping it over again, as if the screen would tell me more if I looked at it from a different angle. Every second of those 24 hours she'd been gone rewound in my head like a corrupted tape. The bag she packed, the way she wouldn't meet my eyes, her insistence that she needed silence. I thought I had played my move perfectly by vanishing. I thought the photograph in the safe was my mic drop. But this message made it feel like I had only walked into the first room of a much larger house. I wrote back, "Who is this?" No answer. The dots appeared for a moment, then vanished. I tried to call. Straight to voicemail. My stomach twisted. If someone else had been with her at that Airbnb, they knew enough to reach me. Which meant they'd been watching me too. I couldn't stop thinking about the trash bag on the porch, how it had felt like a symbol at the time. What if it wasn't a symbol at all? What if it was a signal? Some proof she'd left behind for someone else, just like I'd left my envelope for her? My mind started filling in blanks I couldn't verify, but each one felt truer than the last. The late-night team meetings, the new perfumes, the sudden withdrawals from our joint account she swore were for bills. And now an anonymous text. I left the motel. Couldn't stay there another minute. I drove without music, without a destination, just the endless ribbon of highway under my wheels. I passed exit signs I didn't recognize, towns whose names looked like static. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles cracked. I had spent years being the man who didn't ask questions because he didn't want to hear the answers. Now, with one text, the answers were chasing me down the interstate like a cop car with no siren. At a rest stop, I sat on a picnic table under a flickering light, phone in my lap, and opened our shared bank app. My hands shook as I scrolled through the transactions. There it was, a withdrawal I hadn't seen before, dated the same night she'd gone to clear her head. It wasn't for an Airbnb. It was a cash payment at a private airstrip 2 towns over. Private airstrip. I read it again, my throat closing. She hadn't just left for a day. She had left on a plane. With someone. Someone who had my number. For the first time since I'd left, I felt something darker than heartbreak. I felt hunted. Like this wasn't just about a marriage anymore. Like I'd stumbled into a story whose rules I didn't understand. I looked up at the dark trees beyond the rest stop lights. They seemed to lean closer. And my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a photo. Her car, in our driveway. Taken from across the street. Sent at 2:14 a.m. I dropped my phone. Literally dropped it, like it burned my hands. The screen hit the wooden slats of the picnic table with a hollow clack, the kind of sound that makes you flinch even when you're alone. I sat there, breath caught in my throat, staring at the photo I had just seen. My wife's car, parked exactly where she always left it, driver's side door still slightly ajar. The porch light was on. The curtains in the living room were open. But none of that was what made my stomach turn. What made me feel like I was being dragged under cold water was the angle of the shot. It was taken from across the street, from the window of the old Walker house. And that house has been abandoned for 6 years. At least, it was supposed to be. I scooped up the phone with shaky fingers, zooming in. The photo wasn't grainy, not like you'd expect from a shaky hand or a long-distance lens. It was clear, almost professional. You could see the faint reflection of my wife in the car window, as if she'd just leaned in to grab something. Maybe her bag, maybe something else. But what chilled me most was what you couldn't see me, because I wasn't there anymore. And someone else knew that. The messages weren't from her. That much was clear now. This wasn't a game Marley was playing. Someone was watching both of us. Someone who knew we were unraveling. Someone who waited for the moment when I finally slipped away and left a vacuum behind. I called the police. It sounds pathetic, I know. A grown man calling the cops from a rest stop like some teenager in a horror movie. But I didn't know what else to do. I gave them the address. Told them I got a suspicious message from someone who claimed to be inside an abandoned house across from mine. The dispatcher asked me if I wanted to meet an officer at the scene. I said no. I couldn't go back. I just wanted someone to check it out. Stay on the line, the dispatcher said. But I hung up. I couldn't listen to the calmness in her voice. It felt like mockery. She didn't get it. No one got it. I drove again, this time toward the coast. Toward the cold, open air where I could think. But my thoughts followed me like shadows that wouldn't stretch. I couldn't outrun them. Every exit sign started to look like a decision I wasn't ready to make. Every motel light flickering in the distance reminded me of home, or what used to be. At around 3:10 a.m., another message came in. No words this time. Just another photo. This one was of my old desk. The drawer slightly open. Inside it, something I never told anyone existed. A small blue notebook. One I had kept for myself for years. It held every gut instinct I had ignored, every late-night suspicion I'd written down and then gaslighted myself into forgetting. I'd never shown it to Marley. Hell, I barely looked at it myself anymore. Whoever sent that photo had opened my desk, found the notebook, and taken the picture just to show me they knew. And the sickest part? They hadn't taken it. The notebook was still there. They wanted me to know they could have taken it, but chose not to. That's a different kind of threat. Not violence. Not robbery. Control. I pulled over on the side of the highway and sat in silence, engine humming. And then my phone lit up one more time. This time, it was a voice message. 38 seconds long. I didn't play it right away, because some part of me, a part I'd buried under years of pretending everything was fine, already knew whose voice I was going to hear. And it wasn't Marley's. I don't know how long I sat there, parked under the buzzing orange glow of a highway floodlight, staring at my phone like it was something venomous. 38 seconds. That's how long the voice message was. Barely enough time to explain anything, but just enough to destroy everything. I told myself not to open it. Told myself it was bait, a trap, a psychological time bomb I wasn't strong enough to defuse. But that part of me, The one that always needed to know even when the truth was poison. That part one. I tapped play. Static, first. Faint background hum. Then a laugh. Not hers. Not Marley's. His. A laugh I hadn't heard in 3 years. A voice I had buried in my past like a corpse without a funeral. Hey, Theo, he said, like we were catching up over beers. Funny where life takes people, huh? Never thought I'd end up back in your neighborhood. Never thought I'd see your wife again, either. But hey, life's got a sense of humor. I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. That voice belonged to Garrett, my former best friend, roommate from college, the guy who'd once slept on my couch for 3 months after his breakup. The same Garrett who disappeared after wrecking my credit and leaving me with a mountain of unpaid bills and one very polite, very fake apology. Marley hated him, or so I thought. She used to call him a walking red flag with Wi-Fi. She said he made her skin crawl, that he was manipulative, self-obsessed, and dangerous in a way he disguised as charm. And I believed her. God help me, I believed her. The message kept playing. I read that little notebook of yours. Intense stuff, man. You've always been the emotional one. Still scribbling out your feelings like a sad little novelist, huh? Anyway, I didn't touch anything. Yet. Just thought you should know, your front door lock is a joke. Click. The message ended. I dropped the phone again. I couldn't tell if my heart was racing or if it had just stopped altogether. My vision tunneled. My fingers went numb. I hadn't seen or heard from Garrett in years, hadn't even spoken his name out loud. I thought I'd cut that chapter out of my life. And yet, here he was, back inside my house, reading the most private thoughts I'd ever put to paper like it was his right. And worst of all, he wasn't bluffing. I opened the app that connected to the home cameras. The feed loaded slowly, too slowly, and when it did, I felt bile rise in my throat. The living room lights were on. My desk lamp, the one I never left on, was glowing. And in the corner of the frame, just barely visible, was a shadow leaning against the stair railing. He was waiting. For me? For Marley? I didn't know. But someone was in that house. Someone who wanted me to come back. And someone who had been watching long before I ever walked out. I had questions screaming in my head, louder than the traffic behind me. Why now? Why her? What was in that notebook that I'd forgotten? And then the worst thought of all slithered in like a whisper. What if Marley never left alone? What if Garrett was with her the whole time? A sudden gust of wind rattled the trees along the roadside, and in that moment, the silence felt less like peace and more like a countdown. I knew I couldn't run forever, but I also knew going back there might be exactly what they wanted. I don't even remember writing half of what was in that notebook. It was one of those things you start in a low moment and never plan to show anyone. A mental vomit bucket. Scraps of paranoia. Fragments of arguments. Scribbled timestamps of things I didn't have the courage to say out loud. I never even finished it. But now it had become the centerpiece of someone else's game, and I was the one being played. Garrett reading that notebook was like handing a scalpel to a sadist. He knew exactly how to use it. He knew which insecurities to amplify, which suspicions to weaponize. And he had Marley. Or she had him. Or maybe they both had me. The lines were blurry now. Everything that once felt concrete, our fights, our silences, our shared life, suddenly felt staged, like a set I'd been living on while the real show was happening behind a two-way mirror. I drove all night without stopping. I didn't have a destination. Just this gut-deep urge to get somewhere that didn't smell like betrayal. I passed diners with flickering signs, gas stations too quiet for comfort, and a billboard advertising something called the Museum of Broken Promises. I almost laughed. Almost. Around 5:40 a.m., just as the sky started bleeding pink over the horizon, I pulled into a dusty roadside motel that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the 90s. The woman at the front desk didn't even ask for ID. Just handed me the key like I was a regular ghost. Room 9. Faint smell of mildew. Stained carpet. But it had 4 walls and a lock, and that was all I needed. I collapsed on the bed, clothes still on, shoes still laced. I didn't sleep. I just laid there, eyes wide, heart crawling. My mind kept looping. If Garrett was in my house, and he'd been with Marley, and he had my notebook, what else did he know? That's when I remembered the box. Buried deep in the garage, behind old Christmas decorations and broken patio chairs. A plain, unmarked cardboard box I hadn't touched in years. It held the only physical evidence of the worst month of my life. The month Marley tried to leave me the first time. The time she said she was going to her sister's and disappeared for 4 days. Back then, she came back with flowers and a story about a silent retreat in the woods to reset her soul. I believed her. Of course I did. I wanted to. But something had never sat right. The receipts I found later for gas stations in a completely different state. The unfamiliar phone number I saw flash on her screen at 2 a.m. The bruises on her arms she said were from hiking. I shoved it all into that box like a crime scene I didn't want to look at. And I never opened it again. If Garrett found that. No, he couldn't have. Unless Marley told him where to look. I sat up in the bed, the old mattress springs groaning under me. My skin felt too tight, like I was wearing the wrong version of myself. I opened my phone again. One new message. Blocked number. It was a photo. The garage. The box. Opened. Its contents laid out neatly across the floor like some ritual. A crumpled map. A set of keys I thought I'd lost. A copy of Marley's old passport. And a second notebook, one I didn't remember writing at all. Below the image, a single line of text. You forgot what you wrote in this one. I stared at it until my vision blurred. I didn't know what was in that second notebook. But the fact that he did meant he had something over me now. Something I didn't even know I'd given him. A gap in my own memory. A weakness I couldn't name. And somewhere in the distance, the sun kept rising like nothing had changed. As if my entire reality hadn't just been rewritten by someone else's hands. I didn't open the second notebook right away. I didn't need to. Just knowing it existed, and that someone else had read pieces of me I couldn't even recall, was enough to make my skin feel like paper soaked in gasoline. I sat on that bed in that faded motel room, surrounded by dusty silence, and felt like my life had been gutted and laid bare by people who were never supposed to hold the knife. But somewhere between panic and paralysis, something shifted. A strange calm rolled over me, not the fragile kind that shatters with one more text, but the deep, heavy kind that settles in after a storm. The kind that leaves your ears ringing, your shirt clinging to your back, but your spine suddenly straight for the first time in years. I realized something. They didn't have power over me. Not anymore. Not Garrett, with his smug voice and gaslighting charm. Not Marley, with her endless deflections, disappearances, and contradictions. And not even that damn notebook filled with pieces of a man I used to be. A man who bent himself backwards trying to be loved by someone who had already packed her escape plan into the glove compartment. For the first time in what felt like my entire adult life, I stood up from that bed with a spine. Not because I had a plan. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I wanted peace. And I finally knew that peace was never going to be something I found in the bottom of an explanation or in someone else's apology. I wasn't going back to the house. That house was never a home. It was a stage where I played the role of the overlooked, overgiving husband while the script got rewritten behind my back. Instead, I drove west. Past the towns where we used to vacation. Past the restaurants I'd cried outside of in parking lots, while she texted other people under the table. I kept driving until the roads got smaller and the sky got bigger. And when I finally stopped, it was at a small, quiet coastal town where no one knew my name. Where the air didn't smell like regret. I got a cheap apartment over a bakery. The owner was an older woman who said I looked like I needed sleep and a cinnamon roll. She was right on both counts. I started writing again, not in a notebook meant to hide pain, but in one meant to build something new. I got a job fixing up old boats with a guy named Rich who didn't ask about my past. Just handed me a wrench and told me to take my time. And I did. One afternoon, months later, I got another message. No number. No name. Just one photo. Garrett. Standing alone in front of what used to be my house. For sale sign in the background. Boarded windows. Empty porch. No caption. I smiled. Not a bitter, victorious smile. Just quiet. Like the smile you give yourself when you finally walk out of a burning building and realize you made it. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Because the man who used to need closure was gone. And the man I was now? He didn't chase ghosts. He fed the seagulls at sunset. He took long walks without looking over his shoulder. And sometimes, when he heard a laugh that sounded like hers, he just kept walking. Free. Finally.